Hello and welcome, everyone. Hopefully you can see and hear me. We are live. This is the Marin Coalition presentation of the 2020 election preview, candidate races, and ballot measures. I'm Scott Pinsky, chair of the Marin Coalition. Pleased to welcome you here again. Once again, we're presenting our program with the dynamic duo of political pundits Dick Spotswood and Greg Brockbank, who I'll introduce in a moment. This is the third of our virtual events for the 2021 season. We're very excited and pleased to be able to bring you these online events while our luncheon activities at McGinnis are not possible. All of these events are going to be done virtually and online for free until further notice. We don't know when that will be. So for now, we're using Zoom, and we're pleased to be able to present these live on Zoom for no cost. The event is being recorded. It will be available soon on our website, marincoalition.org, where you can see all of our past programs for this season. That will include the August and September programs that we had featuring performer Noah Griffin and Marin County Registrar of Voters Linda Roberts. Those were from August and September this year. We welcome all of you to sign up and become members of our organization. If you're not a member, we encourage you to consider joining, which you can do on our website for $30. And either way, we're always pleased to accept donations which make these programs available. Today, we're pleased to present a preview on the upcoming November 3rd elections with Dick Spotswood, a popular independent journal columnist, and Greg Brockbank, longtime Marin County political pundit. Our guests will provide us with an update and commentary on the local races, statewide candidates, and ballot measures. Also, they'll give us an outlook on the presidential and candidate races, congressional races, if there is sufficient time. The program will run for about an hour and 30 minutes or so, depending on the number of questions. To submit a question for the speakers, we kindly ask that you go to the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window. Don't try to use the chat. I believe that's been disabled. So there's a Q&A option. Type your question in there. I will pick it up and try to get as many questions into the program as we can. Let me tell you about our guests, who you probably already know. Dick Spotswood is the politics and government columnist for the Marin Independent Journal. His IJ columns appear every Sunday and Wednesday. A San Francisco native, Dick is a former Mill Valley City Council member from 1980 to 1992 and a three-term mayor of that city. He served for 10 years from 82 to 92 as a director of the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District, representing 11 cities and towns in Marin County. After 4 decades as an attorney, Dick has wisely retired from the law. Greg Brockbank is a self-confessed political junkie of Marin politics, having compiled candidate lists for over 20 years. A frequent speaker and writer, he appears frequently on public access TV to analyze and discuss local elections. Greg is a 30-year attorney, current principal of Marin Law Center, senior member and past chair of the Marin Democratic Party, and he has served on the boards of several dozen civic and political organizations in Marin, including 22 years as an elected official on the College of Marin Board of Trustees and the San Rafael City Council. Our presenters today have both been fly-proofed, I can assure you, and so it is my honor now to please ask you to give a warm virtual welcome to our guests, Greg Brockbank and Dick Spotswood. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you, Scott. Can you hear me?
Nice to see you, Scott. Nice to see
We
you.
are good. We are good.
Okay.
Your show.
We are going to try to cover 4 tiny little topics in 45 minutes before the Q&A, like all the local elections and like all the state ballot propositions and control of both houses of Congress. And oh yes, it's a presidential. Oh yeah,
That's in 2 years. That's in 22, isn't it? But who's running?
Yeah. Well, it's a daunting task, but Dick, I'm delighted to be teamed up with you again, and thank you to Marin Coalition for having us again. You know, I used to attend meetings of this organization 30 some odd years ago, and then I started coming again 15 years ago, and they put me on the board and made me president, and I did all political issues. They said, you don't have to do politics all the time. I said, I don't? Well, what fun is that?
Well, let's get going.
All right. We
Greg,
have,
you start off.
sometimes I count meticulously, sometimes I don't, but there are 11 city councils total, 18 school boards currently total, and probably 20 something special districts. They've all been moved to even numbered years. This is the first year, but a majority of them have no contest because we don't have more candidates filing than there are seats. So we're only going to focus on the ones that are contested, that are on the ballot, where people are campaigning, supposedly. But a theme I want to come to before I turn it over to Dick is for the start, and we'll go back and forth for a minute or two each, maybe, hopefully, ideally, is that there have been very little money raised in very few races by very few candidates, much less than usual, especially incumbents. That is surprising. What do you think, Dick?
Well, I do. I think it's perhaps a virtual campaigning. And the other thing, Greg, is let's face it, everybody is focused on one race, and that's the presidency. And, it's pretty tough to get excited about the the Muir Beach Community Service District, a water board, much less even city council in a place like Fairfax, when you're concentrating on the future of the whole country. I mean,
yeah, good point.
Fairfax, whoever wins in Fairfax, it's going to be a nice town.
That's one of the reasons.
Necessarily apply to America.
There are a lot of good reasons, pro and con, to make this switch. But people like Annie Laser from the League of Women Voters and I mostly think that why should the local candidates have to compete with the presidential and the national and the state candidates? That's why it's nice to have an odd numbered years. That's not too big a burden to ask our local citizens to vote for the locals in odd numbered years. But we lost that right. We had to move. Now it's all crunched together. Also, district elections in San Rafael, Novato, and starting next time, the Marin Healthcare District in College of Marin will have districts. So you're campaigning in a smaller area. Theoretically, you should need less money, and you should not be able to raise as much money as if you were running countywide, as I did 5 times for college board.
Well, that's true. That's true. A lot of these races, first of all, there's a priority here. For local races, the marquee races are city council races. Most folks know who their city, at least 1 or 2 of their city councilmen are. It raises their interest. I follow politics every day, and I have a list of everybody running for public office in the county of Marin before me. I mean, it's just, if you don't live in the Reed School District, why would you care who's elected in the Reed School District? You wouldn't. You don't follow it. And so if you write a countywide column, as I do, it's very difficult to concentrate because people just aren't interested in anything except in their own bailiwick. College board might be different. It's been low-key in the last few years. And frankly, it's district, but the Marin Municipal Water District has 2 districts out there. So of all the special districts that are having elections, it seems to me MMWD and College Marin Board are the ones you pay attention to.
Yeah. So of the 5 or so councils that are having city races, Belvedere's tiny. 1 incumbent is running and 3 new candidates. There's 3 seats available. Somebody's got to lose. It's so tiny, and you never hear about these people. The big ones are San Rafael, Fairfax, San Anselmo, and we have incumbents running in all of those, but they're being challenged in all of those. That's by strong challengers. That's not that usual. Sometimes you have no names, no chance, nobody's ever heard of. And that's true in the mayor's race, but there's good challengers against incumbents, even though I hadn't heard about controversies in these cities, including San Rafael, where I was on the council 10 years ago.
Well, but San Rafael, that's a good way to start. Actually, let's look at the 4th district, where the incumbent is John Gamblin, Greg Nell, longtime San Rafael school board member, and Rachel Kurtz, also a San Rafael Board of Education member. Nell is probably the best funded of the campaigns, and Gamblin is running a low-key campaign, let's face it. And so these are not races about fundamental change. You now have district elections, and people that live in the districts want to have their own perspective. So it's just natural that an incumbent will be challenged, and it's not as natural as it used to be that an incumbent is reelected. It's a new
city councils especially rarely have a free ride. I think there's Tiburon this year, and last fall there was 1 or something, but usually they get challenged. Unlike school boards, which are about 50-50, and the special districts, which are about 75-25, you're going to get a free ride because rarely are they challenged. The incumbents run for re-election forever, and if somebody steps down, 1 person runs to replace them.
San Anselmo has a very vigorous race for town council.
Yes.
And I ran a story yesterday, which I think is kind of interesting, that one of the candidates, Eileen Burke, lost her endorsement of the firefighters because they said to her, if you don't change your position, She's for looking at all options to resolve the public employee pension dilemma, unfunded pensions, including the possibility of 401k plans for new hires. She's not saying she's for it, but she's willing to look at it. They made it clear, if you don't take that back, we'll dump your endorsement. She didn't, they did. Does that help or hurt her?
That's a good one. It depends on the race. The firefighters were instrumental in my first race for city council 12 years ago. Thereafter, not so much. They occasionally play, sometimes they don't. I think they're going through a resurgence. They got a new guy named John Bagala, who's Paul Cohen's alternate on the Central Committee, and they're doing endorsements as if their endorsements are as comparable to the Democratic Party's endorsements and the Marin Women's Political Action Committee endorsements, to name two, where I'm on the endorsement committee, where they interview people early and endorse them early in a countywide candidates forum. If you win those two, you're probably going to win. If you don't, you're probably going to lose.
In Morrill Valley last time, their big issue is 3 firemen in every truck. That's the big issue. It's kind of a litmus test issue. They couldn't believe the pension was up. And it's a full employment issue. So the mayor of Mill Valley was unopposed. Jim Wickham, lifetime police officer. They didn't endorse him. He won. Sashi McEntee was on the ballot. They didn't endorse her. She won. It's San Francisco style politics, but it's high risk, high lose. How do you think you're going to feel if you're on the city council after they dumped you because you wouldn't go for that? And now you're saying you want some more money. Really? Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
I know a lot of people, including mostly Republicans and some moderates, I don't know if that includes you, Dick, suffer from this delusion that nearly all Democratic office holders, even in nonpartisan offices like Marin's local offices, are tied lock, stock, and barrel and under the thumb of the public employee unions. In nearly all cases, I can think of 1 or 2 exceptions, it's a small fraction of their money. Yes, they get them more than Republicans, but they're not dependent on them.
The 2 of the people I've served with when I was in public office were former union officials. One was a current union official at the time of the laborers union, and the other was with the SEIU. Both of them on the boards were the toughest when it came to labor negotiations, the toughest. The guy on the Golden Gate Bridge board, he said he had no risk. What are they going to go against him at the next time the endorsements are coming up? He's a labor professional. And he would say, that's a little too much. And the other guy on the city council would say, don't give them that. They always ask for it. They don't really expect it. I mean, I like labor guys. I think they're terrific because they sometimes know the inside game.
Oh, yeah.
And if they take their oath seriously, they're damn good. Paul Cohen was like that.
This is one of many dozens of topics we could talk about for hours, but let's move on. But I just want to make one last comment that it's I don't foresee a disentanglement of big labor and the Democratic Party. No. They're prominent features at fundraisers and funders and such fundraisers. And I think that's fine. And I think that's good. And, we know where to draw the line. I don't think any elected officials, contrary to some people's mistaken beliefs, I think, are going out there saying, oh, we'll give you raises, just endorse me and give me money. It's true that Democrats' governing philosophies often more closely align with those of working people, including the labor unions who represent the working people. So naturally, they're going to support Democrats more often, and Democrats are going to seek their support. That doesn't mean there's a quid pro quo or an exchange of favors, especially not here in Marin at the local level.
We'd be a little better off if California had a second party.
I know some people that are pushing the Common Sense Party as sort of a moderate alternative with Tom Campbell and I think anyway, let's go on to the races before we forget them.
Yes, let's do it.
Fairfax has 3, I'm just kind of going in alphabetical order for my list here.
And I may not have a comment on everyone.
Yeah, there are 3 incumbents are running for re-election. Bruce Ackerman for a 2nd term, Barbara Kohler for maybe a 4th, John Reed for maybe a 5th, I don't know. They've been around a long time, and they usually campaign, and they raise 5,000 or 10,000. Except this year, they're not. Nobody's raising any. Bruce Ackerman doesn't report. Barbara Kohler has raised 4,000 or 5,000, which is more than most incumbents. But everybody's contributing some of their own money, usually about a third of their total, give or take. And John Reed has done nothing. So, and meanwhile, you've got a dynamic challenger named Chance Cutrano, young guy, progressive. You're going to hear this a lot. And he's raising money and getting endorsements from the Democratic Party and the Marin Women's Political Action Committee. And I think they're going to win. I'm just not sure who's going to lose among the incumbents, which is rare for any incumbent to lose. But John Reed seems the least active of the 3. Maybe Bruce Ackerman, although he seems like a nice guy. I like him. That's true of all of them. What do you think, Dick?
Well, all I know is we're going to interview them all at about 1:45 at the IJ editorial board. So I'll let you know after that. I don't think the endorsements are really worth a heck of a lot. Almost all the candidates are Democrats. So and you have your go-to list on their party preference. But it's just a question of which faction of the Democratic Party you want to be in. And so the Central Committee is going to always pick the left faction. And it's just the way it is. You know, and most people, I don't think, say, I liked Ackerman, but darn, the Democratic Party went the other way. Who's going to say that? And the Marin Democratic Party, who's going to say that?
A few people, but not many. I admit. It is possible, but it's rare when someone can get by and say, I'm running on name recognition. I'm running because I've been an incumbent for years. And if I can't run on my own name, but I think a lot of them are making that choice. I think it's arrogant and presumptuous not to have a ballot, and several have done that.
Anyway. You owe a campaign. The public is owed a campaign because it's a chance to interact with the candidate. There's a reason to have these elections. And without a vigorous campaign, you don't earn a mandate to do anything new when you get reelected or elected.
It's good to be elected. That's another great point. Now, San Anselmo is much like Fairfax. 3 incumbents, all running for re-election, dynamic challengers. You started to mention San Anselmo earlier. That was a good example. I like that. John Wright, Alexis Feynman, and Brian Colbert are the 3 incumbents, and they're all doing well, except none of them are raising any money to speak of. And the 2 women challengers, Eileen Burke and Ann Politzer, both dynamic, hard-charging, experienced local people, have raised like 9,000 something each.
Yeah, but it's a very vigorous campaign. I think people in San Anselmo are it's a town where there's a higher recognition of the council, and there's a good civic life. It's a good, healthy. They fight like mad, but it's a very healthy civic community in San Anselmo. I happen to think that it's a good crowd, and I think it really gives everybody, you know, Alex Feynman, she's out in the left. She makes her position unequivocally clear, and that's great. No waffling, and the same thing with Burke when she stood her ground on that stuff. No waffling. I think, and Colbert, you know, he's shown real leadership. I think of all the people in that council, it could move up if Katie Rice steps down sometime, just retires. Colbert's the obvious candidate if he's interested.
Colbert's impressive. And John Wright's been around for like 20 years as an elected official on 2 different school boards and now a long time on the city council, but he's not active in this campaign. And Alexis Feynman is trying to be a progressive young vital, but she hasn't raised a lot of money. So usually I say, well, the incumbents have done a good job as far as I know, and that's true in this case. And they've raised the most money, and the challengers are unknown and they haven't raised any money. They have no chance. But in this case, the incumbents have not raised money in most cases, including this. And the challengers have, and the challenger, 1 or 2 of the challengers may win in San Anselmo and some of these other places. And so, gee, which incumbent's going to lose? That's going to be fun watching the election results.
Exactly. November. All the election results locally. We want to pay attention locally. This is going to be one of the 2 or 3. I think one of the San Rafael Council races in District, the one where
4, I think 4.
District 4. But, I think those are the 2 to watch. The most fun to see where there's a race.
I was just going to move to that. Now, this is the first time. Even though Santa Fe was the first to get the letter and move to district elections, they actually haven't had any district elections till now. And so Nevada had their first district elections last fall. But so Santa Fe's having his first district elections. There were 2 districts up. One of them, Micah Giulotti, president of the school board, is moving into unopposed. The other one is occupied by incumbent John Gamblin, who is running for re-election in the Terra Linda area, but has 2 other challengers, also both from the Santa Fe school board. Now, my question is, what is in the Kool-Aid that school board is drinking? The 3 of them are running for re-election, and there's a 4th one very interested. 4 out of 5 are interested in being on the city. It's not unusual for one once in a while, you know, perfectly normal, but 4 out of 5?
Yeah. Well, maybe they just want to get off the school board.
I haven't heard anything that bad about the school board, and I've started to listen to most of the candidates forum, a lot of the candidates forums, including the school boards. Like the Santa Fe school board has an open seat, also a district seat for the first time. And, you know, I don't know that there's huge problems or issues that are, some of these longtime incumbents are good. Greg Nell is good. Rachel Kurtz is good. It's going to be a tough choice. Greg Nell, you're right, has an incredibly long resume, very strong, raised a lot of money. Not everybody likes him, but the same is true of Rachel Kurtz. Hasn't raised as much money, maybe 2/3. Done a lot of good things, hasn't been on as long. Some people like her better, some don't. It's a tough one.
Well, what a joy to have 3 qualified candidates.
Exactly. And the incumbent, John Gamblin.
You could say, This is what we don't have it enough because in many cases, it's hard to recruit qualified people to run for local office, especially in today's environment where there's so much anger out there.
Yeah. So I think we're going to be fine. John Gamblin has been on 6 or 7 years. He was appointed to fill a vacancy. I got to tell you a funny story. Paul Cohen and I were in the back of the room while the council was deliberating and voting on who to replace. I think Damon Connolly, this vacancy was. And we had our favorite, one or two, and they're the same. And John Gamblin was not among them. And suddenly the council appointed John Gamblin, and we looked at each other and say, whoa, we didn't see that coming. He had been like 2 years on Parks and Rec. He's a stockbroker, I think, in Corte Madera or something. And he's a Republican. Now I realize that this is nonpartisan races. Most people don't know. Most people don't care. I think he's the only Republican I know of on the ballot. That's really going along. It used to be, half, a third of them, quarter of them, tenth of them.
As a writer said in San Francisco of the 11-member Board of Supervisors, would it be so hard to have at least one Republican?
Not in San Francisco.
No.
In fact, how about the Marin Board of Supervisors? No. Now, Santa Fe had Al Boro as mayor for 30 years. He's a very liberal Republican, but he was a Republican. So I think city councils usually people accept that.
I'm not sure he still is a Republican.
Liberal Mill Valley has 3 Republicans on the 5-member council, right?
2 I know of.
Sashi and Jim Wickham and Macaulay? No, not Macaulay.
No, he's an independent, I think.
There's a third I'm blanking on now. Maybe they just left the count. No. Anyway.
I have to go to the Greg Brockbank list to find these answers.
That's all right. I'm just I just had the contested races in front of me, which were almost good. Sausalito is a wild race. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people running. 2 who are running for at least the second time, who I think are going to be strong. Only 1 incumbent, Joan Cox, who has raised diddly squat like $300 or something. I would have thought she'd be strong, but as the only incumbent, but no. Melissa Blaustein, who ran 2 years ago, suddenly has raised like $32,000. And another
32,000?
Yeah, Janelle Kelman is a planning commissioner. She's won like 20-something thousand. So those are the second and third top fundraisers behind Paul De Silva running for College of Marin in the county among all candidates, and none of them are incumbents. But so I think Melissa Blaustein will run it for no other reason than she's running for the second time. She's hard charging, dynamic, has political experience in life, even though she's young. I think she's 30-something. She I think is one of these marathon swimmers. Cool.
She's very qualified. She's
but she'll be fine. And she's got all this money and she's going to win. And now Vicki Nichols, I really like. She's running for, I think, the 3rd time. But she gets stronger and stronger. She's raising a decent amount of money. She's been on the planning commission a long time. She knows everything and everybody. And she's my go-to person for information about Sausalito. So Vicki Nichols is very good. The 3rd seat, I don't know, incumbent Joan Cox. There's somebody named Aaron Singer who's raised 10,000, but 3/4 of it is from himself. Ian Sobieski has raised something. One of them is an airline pilot that operates the seaplane there.
Oh, yeah.
I forget which one. Ian Sobieski, I think. No, Aaron Singer. I'm sorry. Anyway, so you've got an interesting and large collection of candidates, including a couple of women who've run before that may well win. Only 1 incumbent, and a couple of guys that are also at least raising some money. Any comments on Sausalito?
No, you got it. Sausalito is a vigorous campaign. I would not underestimate the sign campaign in Sausalito. Sausalito is a town where people like to put up South signs, and that's a great way to demonstrate at very low cost your support.
Let's go on to the College Board if we may, just because I think we've covered the main council races and we've got to move quickly, much more quickly. College Board has all 4 incumbents running for re-election. Does this sound familiar? Usually they all raise, I used to raise $7,000 my first few races. In more recent years, they've raised $30,000 or $40,000 and they do mailings. I never did that as a long time ago, 15 years ago, I last ran. Anyway, 20. Anyway, suddenly nobody's raising any money. None of the 4 incumbents, except one, Phil Cranenberg, $5,000. Not a lot, but something. The others are not raising anything. 2 are not even filing reports. What is happening? Is that being presumptuous or arrogant to think that they can win a College Board countywide seat where nobody knows or cares who they are? Believe me, I know. That's dumb. And meanwhile, you have this dynamic, youngish looking still professor named Paul De Silva, biology professor, who's I remember when he's hired 23 years. That's how far back I go. But he says all the right things, does all the right thing, dynamic young activist, just retired after 23 years, but he still looks youngish. He's going to win. He's raised lots of money. He's got all the endorsements. So what incumbents lose?
Well, for Paul, Greg, De Silva was very good when it came to the IJ editorial board, but I would not use the word youngish to describe him.
Okay.
More than I would use the words to say the youngest Greg Brockbank.
Yeah, that's true.
So he's retired.
Yes.
So and he's not a youth candidate. He's the experienced candidate.
Youngish for a retired guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, young for a retired guy.
23. Anyway, but so the incumbents are Eva Long. Oh, they're all politically sophisticated. They are, and that's unusual. Most are not, but in the College Board, they are. Eva Long's been around for 20 years, I think, on the College Board and lots of other boards. I know her extremely well, but I don't know if she's Stephanie O'Brien, extremely political sophisticated, but recently active and helps us as the candidates forums for the Marin Women's Political Action Committee. Very bright, very articulate, very go. But not filing a report. That leaves Phil Cranenberg with $5,000, and who's the fourth one? I'm forgetting. Stuart Tannenberg raised a few $100s. All perfectly fine, I guess, but they're going to get beaten by Paul De Silva, and one of them's going to lose at least, if not. I don't see the sixth candidate as
the other candidate is Robbie Paulson, who called in the IJ editorial board from his residence at a homeless camp in Novato yesterday.
Oh, I knew he was a young student. I think I've heard him.
Yeah.
Some of these young students are good and dynamic and could win, but mostly they're not ready for prime time. Mostly they don't understand.
He has one position, and every answer to the question gets back to that position: abolish the College Marin Police Department.
Yeah, that's right. I think I saw that somewhere. He has a candidate ballot statement I read, and in Spanish too, I think. So he came up with money for that, but he doesn't have enough for a hotel. That's sad, very sad.
The problem with even raising $5,000 for the College Board is that it's impossible to have an effect unless you want to print your own house signs. House signs is about all you can do, because any of their advertisement, that doesn't go very far. So you're right. I suspect that they're hoping name recognition and the word incumbent does the trick. But as you say, De Silva is working and running a very vigorous campaign, and it would not surprise me the slightest if he won.
I just got a mailer from him yesterday. I'm not surprised. What else are they going to do with his $49,000? Now, Wandine Traynor, Diana Conti, Suzanne Brown Crow, others on the College Board, past and present, those are all present, all raise that kind of money, and they all do mailers, especially if they're a tough campaign, as they are now. I'm not know why none of them are doing that this time. I used to raise $5,000 or $7,000 and get about 100 endorsers and put an ad in the IJ and a few other local newspapers, and that was my campaign. So I never got in on that raise $30,000 or $40,000, sent a lot of mailers till I ran for the city of Santa Fe 3 times, and then I was raising $40,000 each time and doing 3 mailers or whatever each time.
Let me give Stephanie O'Brien a note. Yesterday, I asked her. They came before the editorial board. And I said, what about term limits? And I also asked about the newly elected district for the College Board. I mean, the feeling of some people is that the incumbents are going to draw the lines so that coincidentally, nobody runs against each other. First of all, with O'Brien, she says, I'm running for my 3rd term. When I first ran, I promised 3 terms for my limit. I'm upping that. I'm not running again. This is my last term. 3 terms should be my limit. Part of the problems the other folks have, it's very difficult for College Board members to know when to go. They see it as kind of, they like it. It's not that controversial, and it's part of their identity. And I can't feel bad about that, because the hardest thing to do in politics is knowing when to leave. And you want to leave with all flags flying, not the submarine going down.
I couldn't agree more. When I was there and one time I left, Barbara Dolan and Phyllis Metcalf had been there longer than me, and I was there 18 years. So it is. I definitely have seen that in a lot of people, including current people on there, that maybe shouldn't have run again. I don't want to mention any names. These are my friends and colleagues for decades. But people should watch candidates forums and draw their own conclusions. Unless they're swayed by mailers and endorsements, they're going to vote for Paul De Silva probably, and so they got to decide which 3 of the 4 incumbents they're going to vote for, unless they're going to vote for Robbie Powelson or whatever. Anyway.
I wanted to mention before we forget the MMWD race, because Water District has, at least for people outside of Greater Novato and outside of West Marin, which have their own separate water agencies, there's 2 districts here, and they've had districts forever. In my mind, it's one of the few agencies in the county which should always have been district. Other ones,
yeah,
we know the
we haven't even covered all the local races, and yet we've taken 15 or 20 minutes, and we're supposed to take more than 10. I'm trying to think if there's any other hot ones countywide. Well, Lisa Bennett for Sausalito Marin City School Board, bless her. She's one of these super activists, liberal activists. Her campaign motto or her sign-on is many hats, she is indeed. And she's raised a ton of money. She'll probably win. 2 incumbents running the Tamalpais Union High School Board. Tell me if this is a broken record. Challenged by 3 people. Only 2 of them has raised money, both challengers, Tiffany McElroy and Brandon Johnson, each $3,000. The healthcare district we haven't mentioned.
Let me stop for a second there.
Sure.
And just say that we interviewed them all. I compliment people who run for local office. I really do. I struggled to find one person in the Tamalpais Junior High School district who I can mark my ballot for. I was unimpressed.
Really?
Yes. And they would not answer questions. The incumbents, what about Drake High School? Good question. I need to think about that some more, renaming it. What about think about it some more? It's not that complicated. And what about school resource officers? Very good question. We need to ponder that and think about it. It has pluses, it has minuses. Yeah. Give me an answer. These are not complicated. I'm for changing the name. I'm against changing the name. School resources, we've had them forever. They're good. School resources, I hate cops. Whatever it is, tell us. It's like saying, if I said to you, Greg, what do you think about the presidential race? Well, Trump is strong but crazy. Biden is honest and nice but old. I mean, you have an opinion stronger than that.
Now, I did see a candidates forum from them last week, I think, and they all seemed pretty good. The 2 incumbents and at least 1 or 2 of the 3 or 4 challengers. I was surprised, but obviously all is not well in the Tamalpais Union High School district where my mother served like 40 years ago.
Oh, that's right.
But it's obviously they overshot, I think, and tried to pass too big an increase in an additional partial tax. Okay, well, let's at least renew the one we got. Please, please, please. That's what they're doing now. But people don't like the board members, I guess. That's why they have a lot of challengers. Some of them quite impressive.
No, but people don't list holistic. This Tamalpais, that great name change. You don't think people are pissed off one way or the other? And they didn't bungle that? I just had a complete document production act from the school on whole sorts of stuff, which to their credit, they supplied. How much money has the district used district funds to not educate the voters or educate the voters? A lot of money. Last time they used their school foundations. I asked them the question, will you commit to not using the school foundations to pay the $430,000 to change the Drake name? Oh, I don't know. I have no control over the school foundations. They're an independent body. Yeah, right.
Well, and we could get into this another time, but the whether or not that money could be raised anyway and used for other things is another question. There may be some people, maybe a lot, that would contribute money for this and nothing else. So it doesn't cost any.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that. If somebody wants to come up with the dough, fine.
But I do have problems with name changes, especially unilateral, citizen activist inspired, middle of the night, statue toppling inspired. Hey, let's do the opposite. I'm going to start a movement to install a statue in the middle of the night to Dick Spotswood. How about that, Dick?
No.
Anyway,
a traffic circle, so they can
Marin
scream
Healthcare.
it.
You know anything about Marin Healthcare District? I just talked to my key source last night, but after decades of battles, as you know, the last 10 years or so, as you know, have been very peaceful, and all the incumbents have sung kumbaya, and they've been endorsing each other and everything until now. Now we have a candidate running, Edward Alfrey, who's running for the second time. He ran 2 years ago. A distinguished surgeon, like most of the candidates there these days, and most of the board. But he's supported by 2 of the board members, despite the fact that 2 incumbents are also running for re-election. You've heard this before, Hank Simmons and Ann Sparkman. So why is a guy running who is supported by 2 others? So all is not well at the Marin Healthcare District, I guess, unless somebody's throwing a snit fit and overreacting, which I suspect is what's happening. And while the incumbents may not be perfect, they still may be fine. And this challenger works for the hospital, which is not an insurmountable problem, but it presents one. And there are reasons why he's not on the board and didn't win 2 years ago when there was a good shot, because he has a ballot statement this time and then. And last time he was running against a guy, and this time that doesn't have one, and he lost anyway.
Here's a
so I don't know. I have my doubts and concerns, including his political party, American Independent. Come on. Remember George Wallace, 1960s segregation party? Now, maybe he was confused and thinks he was an independent, and that's why he chose American Independent Party, not knowing. There's many people in that category. Maybe the majority that are so registered. I don't know.
As an aside, Greg, the Los Angeles Times polled that in Los Angeles County, and the vast majority of people were confused. The American Independent Party nominees. It's obviously confusing and unfortunate. It is George Wallace's heritage, but you know, what are you going to say? But the
Somebody ought to tell
there's a teaching moment on the healthcare district. And that is, if you don't know anything about the issues, or you don't know the names of the candidates, I went over this. My ballot's still blank as far as the healthcare district is concerned. I don't know much about I don't know anything about those candidates. I'm not going to vote simply because I'm part Italian. The guy's got an Italian name. You know what I'm saying? Do not vote if you don't know anything about the race. There's nothing that says you have to vote for everything up and down the ballot. If you don't know, take a pass.
Well, that pretty much covers, at least briefly, all the city councils and the major school boards, and we should move on because we're running out of space. There's also a few community service district. I'm glad you mentioned the water district. Mark Lubomirski, local boy, well suited for city council. Suddenly he's running for water board. I'm not sure why. He's raised 11,000. That's more than most candidates, but not near enough because Monty Schmidt, who is the kind of water professional that seems to win those water board seats in recent decades, is running and has 3 times as much money raised and a lot of key mainstream environmentalists. And I predict Monty Schmidt will deliver a rare defeat to Paul Cohen's, who rarely loses. His candidates rarely lose, but I don't see how Mark Lubomirski, nice a guy as he is, doesn't really have any water background.
I'll give you an answer to that. They've got too many water people. It's like having too many lawyers. What's the worst thing on the city council? You have a choice between 5 lawyers and none. Hardly none. 1 is good.
I don't even know that 1 is good. I have a rule: no 3 lawyers. You get 3 lawyers, forget it.
That's all. It doesn't work. On the water board, it's easy. By the way, Karsten Anderson is not campaigning. He dropped out of the race in that, just so you know that. Mark Lubomirski and Monty Schmidt. It's easy. If you're for everything that the board is doing right now and you think they're doing a great job, you vote for Monty Schmidt. If you think the board is doing perhaps not the ideal that you want, rates or whatever, or land management, you vote for Lubomirski. In the other district, which is the Tiburon Center 2nd District, Larry Russell, quality water engineer. Well, if you want a water engineer and think everything's going hunky-dory, you vote for Larry Russell. His opposition is Chris Hobbs. If you think that the board is not going exactly the way you want it, maybe the rates are arbitrary, you don't like something about it, I don't know, you vote for Chris Hobbs.
Except he's raised 0 money, so I don't think he's a serious candidate.
Well, but that's the basic deal. And you know, Larry Russell, you know, how many of these guys actually show up at the meetings? One of the great scandals of the water board is that these guys, some guys were phoning in from casinos. They call it, if you don't care enough or have the time enough to show up at the meeting in person, forget about the virus.
I agree.
Normal times, don't run. And if I saw a candidate and he was a water genius and never showed up at the board,
I agree with you. Remember the old phrase, he's phoning it in, meaning he's checked out, he's not putting much energy in effort. These days, everybody's phoning it in on Zoom meetings, but some of these water board candidates I hear were not attending meetings in person even before the current pandemic.
Oh yeah, and they get paid per meeting. Matter of fact, why did you do this? You pay us if you don't show.
Yeah. Listen, let's go on quickly here. There's still others we could talk to, but we're running out of time quickly, and we're really going to short ourselves on the propositions. The propositions are not as daunting as they seem. There are a few that we're going to have to give short shrift to, but some are no-brainers, like Proposition 17 and 18 on voting rights. Do you think that 17-year-olds ought to vote in the primary if they're going to vote in the general anyway because they're 18, but they're not quite 18 for the primary? This locks them in and says, yes, that's a good idea. Everybody says yes, no opposition.
No.
Same with,
I say it's a bad idea, Greg.
Yeah.
I think it's a stupid idea. I think it's an example of Democrats and the legislature going too far. No, a 17-year-old should not vote in the primary. It's a rotten idea. And you know, an 18, sure. 17, yeah.
17 and a half.
Why not 16? Why not 15?
They're seniors in high school.
It's the left always takes this stuff one step too far. This is one step too far. I mark my ballot a no on I'm all for the felons. If you paid your debt to society, you paid your debt to society.
But you really got a hard line at age 18.
I'm against 18.
It locks them in. Too many young people don't vote.
They're gonna vote.
All right. Affirmative action back, Prop 16. I think 209 was a mistake. I think affirmative action is a good thing. By the way, most people define it wrong. The best definition I've seen is that affirmative action is a set of remedies designed to remedy past discrimination. That's a much better and more accurate and appropriate definition, at least that I've known for the last decade or two. But I think people are becoming sympathetic enough to the fact that not only were African Americans, for example, and women, for example, screwed for decades or centuries, it's time to make up for that in various ways. And I like the word reckoning, which is commonly used these days to say that this is what our nation is going through, and we should. And repealing the ban on affirmative action is one of those. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to vote yes on it, but I would have preferred it to have a 20-year sunset clause. At some point in time, this becomes perpetual. And either we're going to be able to do something about remedying frankly, the leftists made a lot of complaints accurately, and their solutions have been weak, if you will. I'd like to see things work. I'd be happy to give this, and I'm going to vote for it. But I think a 20-year, let's do it. Let's find out by 2040 if we're making any progress. If this doesn't work, we got to try something else.
Reasonable suggestion. Anyway, Prop 14 is the renewal of the stem cell research, Center for Regenerative Medicine. I don't know if some of us thought when this was started 15 years ago, whatever it was, okay, that's all we need for life, but now they want more money. I don't know that there's any opposition. It still sounds like a good thing. I'm sure there are some things they have done and we'd like to do, but this is not the way scientific research is usually funded.
I believe the Los Angeles Times urged a no vote.
Really?
Yeah, there's opposition to this because it doesn't end. And who is the one that benefits? You know, it's not just the stem cell. It's like, God forbid, the dialysis measure. You know, there's dirty money involved. You know, I mean, it's everybody's got their hand out. And this one is for last time it was $5 billion in bonds. Bonds aren't free money.
Yeah. Prop 15. Let's talk about Children and Families First. It has lots of different names, but it's reassessing commercial properties regularly, so that, you know, they used to pay a majority of the overall property tax. Now they pay a minority because they don't turn over as fast, because most of them are owned by corporations for years. So that anything's more than 3 million, and then we reassess them every 3 years, and that's a big windfall initially in the next few years and thereafter for schools and local governments which need it. And commercial property owners have been getting an unfair tax break for decades since Prop 13. What do you think?
I think that you're going to see this in my column. Xavier Becerra, the Attorney General, who's more interested in moving it up the greasy slope of California Democratic politics to be the senator, and whose reputation for transparency, at least in Sausalito, is weak, wins my annual Xavier Becerra Award, named after him, for misleading ballot proposition descriptions. He's supposed to have neutral descriptions. Becerra never has a neutral description if he cares about it or his constituency cares about it. You read this ballot description of Proposition 15, you have no idea it has anything to do with split tax rolls. Becerra, it's a disgrace. The other thing is, the tax machine is insatiable. When this passes, and if it passes, I don't know if it will, but if this passes, it produces a huge amount of money, which will immediately be eaten up by more wages, more employees. If this passes, mark my words, it's going to open the door to getting rid of, next time, despite what they say, Proposition 13 for homeowners. Open the door, start cracking Proposition 13, homeowners are next.
I know some people feel that way, but I don't think that'll happen because they turn over on average every 10 years. Some people have had their homes for 30 or 40 years. They're enjoying huge benefits. They're paying property taxes that are a tenth of what their next door neighbor is because they just bought it. It is inherently unfair.
You and me, that's right. If you want to raise your taxes.
Well, anyway, it's a tough one. There's some strong feelings about voting no, but I think overall it's a good thing. It's a long needed, it's overdue correction to an unfairness that commercial property tax owners, especially corporations, have been getting a break because of this loophole, because they were never reassessed. Anyway, let's go on quick. I think we're to about, there's a couple of conservative ones in here, although not usually the kind of conservative ones which drive conservatives to the polls, which Republicans usually do. Criminal justice, let's make this, some of those things went too far. This is not the time for that. I think people are in the mood to reduce the jail population, loosen up, as they've been doing for 5 or 10 years after 20 or whatever of tightening them up. What do you think, Dick?
Well, the limit on it's a felony if it's under a certain amount of dollars is really one of the reasons why they've the car bar in San Francisco has skyrocketed. These are smart guys. They know that you can't take something over this value, so they play around with it. You know, there's a certain kind of folk that believes nobody should be in jail. That's not,
Hopefully not too many.
yeah.
Hopefully not too many, because some folks should be in jail.
Some folks should be in jail. The guy who smokes marijuana, well, that's illegal now, but that shouldn't be in jail. I forget about all that nonsense stuff. Break into a guy's car 3 times, yeah, you got to go to jail. You know, you got to do something to discourage this behavior. We're having real problems. Well, San Francisco's having real problems. We're blessed. Let's face it, we're blessed in Marin County. We
are, although we may not be far behind. So San Francisco is not an inapt metaphor for where we may be in 5 or 10 years, especially San Rafael, especially downtown San Rafael.
Well, I have to compliment the city of San Rafael. I think they're doing a good job and they're doing the best they can. But if we're going to mimic San Francisco or, God forbid, Oakland, I don't think the people of Marin County are going to be very happy.
Rent control, Prop 21, very controversial, very difficult, hard to explain. I just finished recording a little thing for the League of Women Voters on it, because analyzing is, I mean, there was no rent control, and then a bunch of cities started doing it 25 years ago, and then this legislature responded 25 years ago by passing Costa-Hawkins, limiting cities' rights to have rent control. And then last year, the legislature passed a bill which has rent control caps for the first time in California history statewide. Is that enough? No. Some people think we want to go further and let more local cities pass their own rent control laws, which they can't now do because Costa-Hawkins still restricts them. So that leads to a lot of arguments about how old should the properties be before you can impose rent control. Right now it's 25 years. They want to make it 15. And vacancy decontrol. The legislation last year, there had been no decontrol for when a property is vacant, you can charge market rate, whatever you can get. But now with the legislation last year, you can only charge up to 15% over 3 years. Well, that might bring you up to market, unless you're one of those landlords that's been charging way under market for a long time. And there are some of those. And I still worry about the mom and pop landlords, although it's true that tenants are struggling and suffering and need some help. And I don't know if this is just a liberal wish list, turn more cities loose. It raises the whole question, and I want your opinion on this, of who should make these decisions? Local bodies like city councils and boards of supervisors, or the state legislature to have a consistent system? Now, it's true that one size doesn't always fit all, but do you really want local city council members and boards of supervisors to try to tailor what's best in the force of sometimes ferocious opposition from those that are really upset by the homeless situation and homeless advocates that are really upset by that the cities and counties are not doing more? It's tough. What do you think?
I don't think it has anything to do with homelessness. The vast majority of our chronic homeless folks have serious mental and double diagnoses. This isn't about homelessness. It's about affordability for working class folks. I don't see it as a homeless thing in the slightest. Working class folks are in a very tough position. Small landlords are in a very tough position. I think that the problem with the legislature is they're not particularly interested in small landlords. It's not their constituency. I tend to trust local governments more than I trust the state of California. And if the city of Berkeley wants to have pretty tough rent control and its council votes for it and its people vote for it, good for them. And if the city of Santa Rosa, picking at random, doesn't want to have any rent control, and that's what the voters say and the council says, good for them. And I tend to be a local control person, just philosophically. I'm not against Sacramento, but if I have a choice, and in this case, you know, the liberal activists can be thrilled to death in Berkeley, and the conservative property owners can be thrilled to death in Hermosa Beach. Maybe
you got a point. I'm usually a local control guy too in most things, and I have to admit to some lack of objectivity, having been a landlord-tenant attorney for 30 plus years now. There have been predictions of a tidal wave of evictions. I have not seen that yet, but it may be starting.
Yeah,
and it's a tough one. As I say, anyway, but this is
I'm
a tough issue.
Person, so that's just where I'm coming from. So therefore, I guess I'm weak. I guess I would be for it.
Yeah. Anyway, lost 2 years ago. May lose again. It's we still haven't covered whether Uber and Lyft should be exempted from the new AB5 law, making them employees rather than independent contractors.
Abolish AB5. Abolish AB5.
Well,
let me give you an example of AB5. The stupidity of it. The people behind it were union guys, and in their mind, the woman, the San Diego assemblyman, in their mind, If we pass this, everybody will be employee and they'll all join unions. Well, how about Dick Spotswood? What are the I come under this thing because I am a freelancer. And if I write I write 100 and some odd columns a year, if I write over 35 columns, I have to go through all these hoops, which I've done. I have a Mill Valley business license. Do you think the Independent Journal, if I'm an employee, is going to say, let's hire Spotswood, put him on staff, and maybe, give him benefit, and then I'll join the guild? Are you crazy? They'll just get rid of they're all gone. It doesn't make financial sense.
I agree with you. Not only in your case, but hundreds of others, including I've been doing a lot of performing in community theaters, and it's devastating to all kinds of nonprofits and writers and creative people. So AB5 may be bad and needs to be tweaked. Whether or not we should carve out an exception for multi-billionaire corporations to continue to abuse and exploit their drivers by not providing them the basic benefits that are due employees if they fit the test of being an employee, and they do. Why should we carve out a special exception for them? Because they're billionaires and they can put in $100 million into this campaign.
I used to represent a few cab drivers. Nobody understands. Do you think cab drivers are employees? People think that. What? Veterans Cab is paying them a salary? My client, here's what he did. He had to pay a fee to get out of the garage. He had the medallion. He didn't own it. So he had to pay the medallion. He paid the medallion in a drop box because the guy who owned it was in Palestine. And then he pays for his own gas and everything else. Taxi drivers are in just as bad situation and are being exploited to the same extent that the Uber guys are. But there's this dichotomy. Oh, I'll use a taxi cab and help. They're the same gig. None of them are employees.
I don't wish to discourage capitalism's key positive benefit, in my opinion, which is allowing new technological ideas to disrupt an industry and provide a better service for anyone. If it makes a few $1 billion for people in the process, that's fine, as long as it doesn't unfairly make the playing field unlevel. And this is a close call. Arguably, Uber and Lyft did disrupt the industry. They are providing a better service. This is all good. Should they be an exception to the AB5? It's a close call maybe, but I think they should be treated like other employees. And let's tweak AB5 some other way rather than this proposition. We got to go. We're running out of time here, and we haven't even touched control of Congress or the presidency. Consumer data privacy. The liberals say, no, don't vote for this because it does more harm than good. Okay. Cash bail, you mentioned, was passed by the legislature finally. Good thing. It should have. They should consider flight risk, not personal finances, and punish you and stick you in jail because you can't afford to pay bail. But the bail bonds industry referended it, and that's why it's on the ballot.
I don't particularly care about the bail bonds industry. All I care about is that when a guy gets arrested for a crime, and if he doesn't have bail, that you put up something he can't handle losing. Because if he doesn't have something you can't handle losing, he's gone. What do you think they're going to say? I got a piece of paper. Oh, it's a court order. I guess I'll have to show up. I'm going to Chicago. That's what's going to happen. I want, if the anti-bail people, nobody should be in jail, folks. They have a whole point. They have a valid point about being able to afford it penalizes poor people. So substitute something for it. When people say, well, okay, we just won't let you out on bail. Whoa, we can't do that. So I want to hear them put up something they can't afford to lose. What, the grandmother? I don't know what it is, but we need to hear that because they're not going to stick around.
Can I change
I wouldn't. Would you?
Yeah, good point. Would
you? I wouldn't. I'm going. I got nothing else going here.
Let's spend 5 minutes at least on the control of both houses of Congress, if we may. And I'd like to sum it up this way, is that I differ from most people, even the optimistic Democratic ones, because I think that not only will the Democrats take the Senate, I think they'll take it by a larger margin than most people do. I could name 3 states right now where the Democrat is comfortably ahead of the Republican incumbent by more than 5 points, some closer to 10. 3 more where it's 1 to 5 points. And if things keep going the way they're going, I think we're going to win those 3 also. And then there's about 3 more, which are toss-ups. So we could take 8 or 9, but 7, I'll take. We're going to lose Doug Jones. So a net 6. So we may have 53 Democrats instead of 53 Republicans in the Senate. What do you think?
Well, I get a little nervous about Cal Cunningham in North Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, another sex scandal. This is, yeah.
What is he thinking? On the other hand, some voters are getting pretty accepting of some sex scandals. What do you hear?
That's right. If the president of the United States can pay off a prostitute, This guy was apparently on the phone. He was doing this. So it wasn't really,
the governor of California 10 years ago had an affair with his scheduler, who was the wife of his campaign consultant. Voters forgave him, reelected him as mayor, elected him as lieutenant governor twice, and now governor.
I'll tell you what I hold against Gavin Newsom. He was married to that, what's her name?
Kimberly Guilfoyle. They were separated. Divorce wasn't final yet.
That's why the mental hospitals should not be closed. Because Kimberly Guilfoyle needs to be in one of them. She's crazy.
Yes, so I
saw it on television.
Yeah.
Mad.
Do you remember that they posed in some glamour magazine, lying on the floor of their mansion among the furs? They were this glamour couple, power couple, but she was kind of a nutcase.
This is a comment about Newsom.
Yeah. Anyway, what do you think will be the result of control of the Senate?
I agree with you. I don't know about the numbers, but I think overall. And
things have been moving in the right direction. They've remained remarkably stable, but Trump is dragging him down, which is what I hoped all along. It's just Trump didn't fall. Now we're getting into Trump. He didn't fall as far as I thought he would, as fast as I thought he would. And he managed to hang on to 30-something% of his base for basically the whole 4 years. And that's all he appeals to. It's not growing. And if he was smart, he'd try to appeal to some people in the middle or something, or get out more people in his base. But
all he had, I don't know.
Yes, well, it's true that everybody's saying, I don't know, Trump could still pull it out. If he surprised everybody 4 years ago. Hillary was ahead, but 4 years ago, Hillary was ahead like 2% in those 3 upper Midwest states. And that's within the margin of error. And she ended up losing by 1% in those 3 Midwest states. So the polls were off like about an average of 3% in all 3 of those polls. Well, now Biden is ahead 5, 6, 7, 8% in those 3 Midwest states outside the margin of error. The chances of him winning are almost certain unless the polls are way off or something really changes, which is getting extremely unlikely this late, this close to the election, especially when millions of people have already voted.
Greg, 4 years ago, the Democrats chose to run a person who was highly polarized, disliked by a large segment of the public, and ran an inept campaign. Not the best way to win an election, but it was her turn, and that was the deal. I believed it at the time, but it was her turn. Well, if they're that's just inept politics. Joe Biden, who says he's evil? That guy from North Carolina, what's his name? Lindsey Graham, one of the nicest persons I've ever met. He doesn't say it anymore, but that's what he used to say. Everybody agrees he's one of the nicest, most compassionate, decent people in politics. Not they ever met, but in politics. He's 77 years old. Okay. What are you going to say? That's the slant. Who gets angry? God damn it. Some man's 77. It's not like Hillary Clinton. I'm not voting for her. I voted for her, but I'm not voting for her. But it's the last thing I do in my life. I'll vote for that Trump. He's not going to win anyway. And that's what happened.
I agree with you. Although most of us knew Trump was crazy then, I still can't understand why so many people voted for him.
They didn't like Hillary.
They didn't like Hillary. Now, I was a Bernie guy then and most of last year, but I never hated Hillary. I thought she did fine in the debates with Bernie. I thought she did fine in the debates with Trump.
Oh, yeah.
I think she would have made a fine president. I think people have been hating Hillary Clinton unfairly for decades. A lot of it is sexism.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. But the trouble is, that's the reality. When you're doing politics, you're trying to win. It's not a morality game. And so this year, for the Republicans, they're trying to, what are they saying? Biden, he's too far left. Wasn't there a primary election where he was the conservative guy? Did I miss something?
It took me a while to warm up to Biden, but I did eventually realize after a long time that, he clinched it early on, but this is what the country needs. They want something reassuring. They want somebody moderate, return to the Obama days. That doesn't sound too bad. And maybe expand Obama. That doesn't sound too bad. Return to normalcy in the international relations, try to rescue this floundering economy. For Trump to say he's the best in the world at everything when he's the worst in the world at everything.
If you meet a person that will not say, I've ever done anything wrong, what did that tell you? I always tell people, I tell clients this. If you find somebody that says, it's my fault, I screwed up, I shouldn't have done that. You finally found an honest person, lend them money, marry them, make them your business partner, because they have the humility to admit, which is absolutely true. Greg, I suspect that you'll agree with me. Each of us in our life have made mistakes. Would you agree with that? Yes. And so that's just the simple, normal humanity that we're all made of. And if the person doesn't have the common sense to admit that, I don't want to marry them, make them a business partner, or lend them, especially lend them money.
I know
angry. You know who I'm angry at? And I hope he's not on this today. I'm angry at my accountant. I'm furious at my accountant, who's a Marin County, I can tell you, San Rafael-based accountant, because I paid more, you won't believe this, more than $750 last year in taxes. What the world? Why not me? What, can't you think of some excuses?
How many millions do you suppose Trump pays his attorneys and tax accountants to say, wait a minute, I have a $39 million claim there, and
I think the question, Greg, is not how much he pays them, how much they bill him.
That's true. He may not pay them. Anyway, Scott's going to interrupt any second here and say, hey,
this is good. I think we've gone over everything except the UN.
Yeah, we were a little brief on the control of the Senate. There he is, and the presidency. But I think they got the picture. And I think there will be questions.
You know,
we're having fun when we do this.
You guys are having fun. We're all having fun, and that's why I've had no inclination to stop this at all. But we do have a few questions, and so I'll be getting into some of those. First of all, just for my own purposes, I guess Dick, you're not a huge fan of Javier Becerra, huh?
No, not my guy.
Not your guy? Okay. You know, what I was thinking about while you were talking about the ballot descriptions is, and I've been concerned about that as well. I don't necessarily read the pamphlet and figure, well, that's all I need to know. Of course, we all look at who's the endorser, who's raised money, who supports, who is against, and that kind of thing. And sometimes that's enough to make a decision for me on some of these things. But the observation I've had in the last couple of weeks has been about the advertising. You know, you click on any news broadcast, CNN or MSNBC or maybe even Fox, I wouldn't know. And all you see, in addition to pharmaceutical advertisements, which are the staple, are now advertisements for the propositions and a couple candidate advertisements, but it's largely the propositions. And I can't even watch them. I can't even watch them because I know that whatever garbage they've put into the content of that advertisement has nothing to do with the reality of the proposition that's being either advertised for or advertised against. Any reaction from you guys as far as how we can get more information that's legitimate out to the public instead of just having this annual barrage of horse crap from the media?
If I may, yes, money in politics is a huge problem. One of my major issues, if not my major issue, for literally decades. And I twice ran the campaign in Marin for publicly financed elections, only to see them go down really big and then narrowly because it was drowned by special interest dark money that we didn't know where it came from, big corporations that like having influence. So we took a detour to pass the Disclose Act, which would require, at least in the case of ballot measures, the top 3 funders of every ad to be listed in the ad itself in sufficiently readable print. And this has helped. And same with TV ads and even radio ads, they'd have to announce them. This has helped. At least we know that, oh, that was sponsored, paid for by Shell, Chevron, and ExxonMobil. That tells me something, as opposed to paid for by Citizens for a Better California, which tells you nothing. So it took several years to get this passed. And now the last few years, we've been working on enhancements and closing loopholes and expanding the Disclose Act. So we will have more information. The big problem is 40-something years ago, the Supreme Court said in Buckley versus Valeo that spending money is a form of free speech and you can't restrict it. So if never worse than in this election, we didn't mention it here, I mentioned a lot of fundraising in the local races, which were tiny. The funding is tens of millions of dollars, and in some cases over $100 million by huge corporations that are very rich. Is this the way we should determine our political issues? No.
I agree with Greg on public financing. I would point out, Greg, that those huge corporations which are using their money to convince you to do what they want are joined by labor unions, particularly public employee labor unions, who have opposed public financing, because if you take out their ability to influence campaigns, oh no, I'm not influenced by money anyway. Everybody's influenced by money. It's terrible. We should take money out of politics. And I agree with you. Public financing campaigns would be a great move to do that. But everybody who gives money, that's their juice.
Yeah, and you've got special interests that don't want to see that money go away either, such as CNN and every media outlet which makes a fortune on these advertisements. Let me move on to some of the viewer questions here. We have a question from Cindy. I'll just read these in. Cindy Winter. It seems to me that Proposition 22 is not at its core about rideshare drivers, but about the future of labor in industry nationwide. If Proposition 22 passes, big business will move more strongly to place their workforce into various kinds of flexible, independent contractor status. But labor leaders want to provide more dependable benefits for their union members. Doesn't Proposition 22 require from voters a fundamental societal choice?
Yes, Greg.
That's Cindy.
Perhaps. We're not going back to 1935 when most people worked in large industrial unions. What's the largest field in the country? Service industries. Believe me, if I've been a union member in two unions, Amalgamated Transport Workers and the railway clerks. If I worked for a big corporation, including a bank, I'd want to be a union member. And I'd want to be represented by a union because it's not a fair relationship. But that's not universal. The union folks see the world as union versus management because that's their world. But that's not the real world. Even stores, our market here in Mill Valley Market is a union store. They have a contract called a Me Too contract. Whatever the big boys agree to, we'll do. Great, that's terrific. I know that my grocery clerks down there have a retirement, vacation, pension. I'm all for that. But it's not universal. I mean, there's some places it doesn't work. If you want to have every cab driver, and Uber and Lyft are basically cab drivers, as employees, the rates will go to such an extent that you don't use them and the whole thing collapses. Is that what you want? So we have to make these fundamental decisions. I don't disagree with the question here about fundamental decisions, but I just think it's a more in-depth question with unintended consequences, whatever way you go.
I addressed this earlier, and it does raise fundamental questions about AB 5 doesn't work for everybody. Some should be exempted. They need to tweak that law. Should they change it to exempt Uber and Lyft drivers and Postmates or DoorDash and Instagram or whatever, not Instagram, delivery services and driver services? I don't know. Maybe studies need to be done. Maybe we need pilot projects. I think we're guessing. Maybe they were prematurely threatened with extinction, and of course, this is their only way to fight back. But maybe we could find a way to make the business profitable and yet still treat the drivers as having the reasonable rights of employees, including organizing. Because in contrast to your comments about, not in contrast, but I too am very supportive of unions. If you read about all the good things and how the average worker has benefited and evolved in the last 100 years or whatever, it's because of unions. And somehow the conservative elements have perpetuated this mythology about fat cat union bosses sitting around being lazy, squandering their members' dues and being an obstacle rather than a conduit to better wages and working conditions. And I think that's unfair. Are there abuses? Of course there are. There are abuses everywhere. I have no reason to believe that the abuses are worse than anywhere else, and unions still do a great deal of good. And it's one of the great tragedies that union membership has fallen from as high as it was a few decades ago to as low as it is now, with the exception of public employees, which are still doing pretty well.
I agree with Greg on the private sector comments.
Okay, let's move on. Esther Wanning, if I'm saying that correctly, has a question. This goes back to what you were discussing earlier in terms of local races, local positions. Why do people want to be on these boards and commissions? She asks, for some reason, pundits don't like to mention that these supposedly unpaid civic positions generally offer health insurance, which is no small inducement to running for office. this is a good reason for some to want to be on, for example, the college board. Any comments? I'm not sure if all these are unpaid. I'm sure some of them have stipends, but go ahead.
First, full disclosure, Esther Wanning is my wife, and she's sitting in the next room and probably I didn't know she was going to call in, but I suspect she feels, I know she feels this way. I actually have to disagree with her at some point. Not all local elected officials get health benefits. Some do, like the college board, and the money they get is in most cases zero, and the cases where they're given something is like $240 a month or something. Nothing anybody is going to do for the money because it's a lot of time. Each month, they do this for the need to serve, the desire to serve, for the right reasons in nearly every case. Health benefits could be worth a little more. Some people are struggling and they need the health benefits. Some people are self-employed and it works out well, and they want to do this on the side, and provide to the degree that it provides them health benefits. I think that's worth it for the service that they provide, and I can't imagine too many people doing it just for that reason.
I can tell you that currently in the city of Mill Valley, the city council members and mayor, I don't know what the mayor, but it might be $100 difference, receive $400 a month and no benefits. And they traditionally do not take expenses. Tiburon Peninsula, traditionally they don't get anything, zero. So I'm not saying that's wrong. I admire them for that. But the belief that a lot of people want these positions is wrong. They don't. The number of people, I can tell you the Marin Municipal Water District, there was one race where a fellow called me, told me he was thinking of running in the morning. Then he calls me from his car and says, I talked to my wife again. I decided not to, and he turned the car around. Seriously, literally, it was in the car. Families don't want spouses to go through this, to take the abuse that currently is often given. It's difficult to get regular, I hate to say this, normal middle-class people to run for office in this county and any county. And it's difficult to find qualified people volunteer for commission assignments. It's grief. And it didn't used to be as much grief. It used to be tough to get people to run, but it's no longer easy. It's easy to get second-rate people, third-rate people who have nothing else to do with their time, but getting first-rate people, almost, I won't say almost impossible, very, very difficult.
I have a question from Betsy Bickle. This again goes to the composition of some of these local boards, and maybe you can give her your thoughts on this. I'll just read her question. It would be helpful to be able to see the rest of the board, which is not up for re-election in any given race. I'd like to see a gender and other items balanced. She's saying more balance and equal distribution of various populations, I'm sure is what she's driving at here. I wish the election materials would at least tell the continuing board members, in other words, list those members that are staying on the board and not up for re-election. Otherwise, do we have to go to the website of each entity to find out this information? Any reaction to that?
Yeah, sometimes you have to do a little work. You're part of being a citizen. If going to a website is too much for you, I'm sorry. I mean, the other, that's just where it is. If you want to have, the English used to do it differently in colonies. When you wanted to have more representation, you designated spots for various ethnic groups. You can do that. It goes against, it's true. In various colonies, they would say there would be a Black person here, a subcontinent Indian position. It was reserved. This was just obvious. We're trying to do the same thing, but we can't do it here because it goes against our concepts. It's just, so we say instead, let's have it represent the community, but then we have to have a bigger community because the current community doesn't represent it. At some place, you got to trust the voters to pick. Mandating city councils with X race, X sex, really? Think that's a good idea? What do you do in Nevada where they've had a majority of women for often? Great, I say, terrific. The voters picked from really qualified women to serve in Nevada. Nevada for a while had a women's dominated city council, women on the city as the supervisors, you name it. It was terrific.
The way in which we get our political information as voters is changing dramatically in the last decade or two. I remember the prediction 10 years ago or so saying, pretty soon we'll get most of our political news over the internet. Well, it didn't happen that quickly, but most of us are now, in fact, getting much or most of our news over the internet. It just took a little longer. Now, I admire the caller and her question for wanting to know the makeup of the rest of the board, besides the ones that they'll be voting on. I have never heard that question asked. I've never seen that information provided. Nobody seems to care about it, including we political junkies that obsess about our lists of who's up this year. And then as soon as their race is not contested, which as I said is over half the time, we don't even care about them. We just care about the contested races. And even among the contested races, very often the challengers are unknown, no endorsements, no money, no campaign, no chance. We forget about them too. There's only a few races each year where, hey, people running for re-election, more people than there are seats that are seriously campaigning. And even then, what do voters listen to? Used to be they'd read their mailers. Now they just toss them. Used to be they'd listen to their calls or robocall. No, door to door. No. How do they watch debates? We actually are getting a little bump in turnout for virtual meetings like this one, compared to in-person meetings, because maybe 80 or 90 people will come instead of 40 or 50 or whatever. But that's still a tiny fraction of a percent. So how are people getting their political information? It's a great mystery. I'm sure campaign consultants will tell you they know the answer, but I think they're guessing. I think they hear one or two little things, secondhand or third hand, and they're relying on that because they don't read the newspapers anymore. I'm sorry, I'm old-fashioned, low-tech. Read the newspapers. You can get a lot of information. And even the newspapers don't cover as much as they used to. And Dick, I'm sure you'll be the first to confirm that.
Absolutely. I'm looking at my ballot right now. President, Congress, Assembly, Community College Board, High School Board, Grammar School Board, Healthcare District, and a left of ballot propositions. In most of the English-speaking world, most of the first world democratic countries, you vote for, well, most of them, you vote for one person. You vote for a member of parliament. That's it. That's the debate. In England, you vote for a member of parliament, member of the European, no, that's no longer the European Parliament, and a city council member. Canada, parliament in the province, national, and city council. We're expecting people to follow obscure races on sanitary district boards. It's asking too much. We vote for too many officials. Every year I talk to the grand jury and ask them, I said, you're the grand jury. I'm going to ask you who's on your city council. These are grand jurors. They usually know one or two or three. Who's on your fire board? They start laughing because nobody knows who's on their fire board. We put too much responsibility on the voters. If we voted for president, Congress, one in the state legislature, our city council, make it 4. But voting for the controller of California, oh my God, it's ridiculous.
I have to throw in some good ways we can get information more easily than we used to because of technology, and both have to do with the League of Women Voters. One is they have something called Voter's Edge, which is like a publication, which is a very brief, who, what, where, why, on the propositions, they have a pros and cons presentation, which I was part of putting together. It takes 1 hour. You listen to 5 minutes or so on each ballot measure, and gives you more than you need to know. So it's worth investing an hour to listen to that League of Women Voters pros and cons presentation. Go to their website, marinlwb.org. And the other one is, and Voter's Edge tells you about the candidates. So there are ways to find out enough information easily from your phone or desktop or whatever.
League of Women Voters is reliable, and they're not going to carry an agenda. And if they ever have an agenda, they tell you, this year, we very much care about this issue. It's very transparent.
Just to clarify, they just came out in an email this morning with, here's our list of positions on all the, now they don't take positions on all the propositions, but most of them. And they support like 5 and oppose like 3. But they're always clear to say that when they're making their presentations, which are completely unbiased. In fact, this year, their presentations don't even mention the position of the League of Women Voters, even though that's a very important position because they're a very prominent and influential group.
So given that we have so many positions that are up for election and so many campaigns that need so much money, here's a question from David Gabriel from our board. And I'll just read it verbatim. I'm not sure I've got all the syntax down correctly. What can we do to eliminate PAC funding, political action committee funding of local candidates? Do we limit contributions? Case in point, Ken Casey, PFI, funding to Novato Chamber of Commerce dispersed to local candidates. I'm not familiar with that, but
represented the single largest financial fraud in the county of Marin's history, period. It was the Security Exchange Commission. I think the people admit it's a Ponzi scheme. And the fact that Casey tried to do it, I don't think he tried to buy so much his influence as try to give the impression that he was a big time guy, a player. And so I think he used folks like the Chamber of Commerce in Nevada, who I presume felt he was just another normal local businessman, to fight the fact that he had previously been convicted of felony financial fraud. How do we stop that, though? That's the question they have. And U.S. law is very restrictive on the ability of local governments to stop this kind of stuff. Right, Greg?
Although Nevada is an exception, they have put $400 contribution limits on individual contributions. So there's some limit there. Now, some of the candidates complain it's harder. I rely on having a few $1,000 or $2,000 contributions. Now I have to get a lot more $400 contributions. Well, that's a luxury for both. It doesn't hurt most of us that rely on smaller contributions, and we're not really hurt by it. Wouldn't really be hurt by a $400 limit. But Dick, I'm really glad to hear you say that you agree with the idea of publicly financed elections.
Absolutely.
It's been working. 15 years, it's been working fine in Arizona and Maine at all levels. It should be working fine everywhere.
New York City.
You're right. And it's mostly conservative Republicans, businesses, chambers of commerce, et cetera, that like their influence and they don't want to lose that. But it's not exclusively them. There are some on the left, including and especially unions, that sometimes hold up our ability to advance this movement of publicly financed elections, and why it took so many years to get the Disclose Act passed.
So let me wrap up with one last question. We're kind of near the end of our time, but I've been wondering about this one issue that you triggered earlier on when you were talking about the fact that so many races have raised no money at all. And you were speculating as to whether or not this was a voluntary phenomenon that candidates are just not caring about running campaigns, or whether they're having difficulty raising the cash. And it made me wonder, is that a function of the fact that a lot of the cash that's going into campaigns is going to state and national campaigns, and in some cases out-of-state campaigns? And what I'm referring to is, I've never made so many political donations in my life, and most of them have not been in California. I've been sending money to senatorial candidates around the country. Don't want to necessarily reveal exactly what races I'm supporting, but you can probably guess just by mere virtue of the fact that a Californian is donating money to a prospective senator in another state.
And Scott, Mitch McConnell is grateful.
I hope he buys me dinner when this is all over. But I've never seen in my many years of watching politics from the sidelines such a groundswell of voter activity and non-voter supporter activity crossing state lines, going to national races, going to the presidential race. Obviously, this is a strange time we're in, and this is a very important election and a very unusual election in many regards. Last example, and then I'll ask for your reactions. I've been writing letters for a particular presidential campaign on behalf of a group that's organizing people to do letter campaigns. And I was emailing a friend of mine telling him, oh, I've just sent off 36 letters to Florida, and he emails me back and he says, well, that's great. I just sent 11,000 postcards to Iowa, voters in Iowa. And I wrote him back, I said, that was a typo, right? You're kidding. It is. You didn't send 11,000 postcards and put a stamp on them that you paid for in every case. And he said, no, I did. He spent thousands of dollars of his own money to mail postcards to support a candidate for state office national office in Florida. I'm sorry, in Iowa. This guy, I didn't even know what party he was in 2 months ago. So the level of intensive involvement and financial support that I'm seeing in this campaign, in this series of races this year, in this election is something that I've never seen before. I'm just curious, first of all, whether that has an impact on the local races that don't get as much attention. And secondly, if you have any observations of your own.
I think it has an impact on local races because people are, just like you say, focused on those national races. This race has been very good for me because it's given me a better perspective on people who've run for office in the past. But I remember I spoke to this group, I think, and I said that when John McCain ran against Barack Obama, it was a no-lose situation for America. Two fine people. You know, it looked like a hard-fought race at the time. They were two fine people, and we would have come out fine either way. Maybe a little bit better, according to my views, one way than the other. And I think we came out very fine with Barack Obama, no question. But this is a different time. I see us in 1860. We're 1860. It's simply 1860, and we're reliving our own history. And you know, that one didn't work out very well. And I'm just praying, and all you can do is pray that it works out better this time. And right now it's probably 60-40 that it does.
What do you say, Greg?
Refresh my memory on the topic.
Just curious about the tenor of the national race, the level of engagement on all levels, but mainly on the national level.
I agree with you that feelings about Trump, mostly anti-Trump, are so strong that has engaged a lot on the left. But people in Trump's base, his pro-Trump people, are also so strong that we're more divided and polarized than ever. It's very scary. As far as your friend that wrote 11,000 postcards, I admit that that's astounding, and not everybody has a few $1,000s. And theoretically, there should be laws to regulate independent expenditures. A quick 10-second note to keep in mind that people have the right to spend as much of their own money as they like, and on any cause that they like, or for any candidate they like. About 10 years ago, there was someone in Marin who I should remain nameless to protect his reputation. He was actually a very bright scholar, a law school graduate, who wrote about publicly financed elections and all that stuff with the California Clean Money Campaign. Bright guy, good friend of mine. But he became known as a hit piece artist because for nearly every election, he would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, well, tens of thousands of dollars of his own money in support of this candidate to demonstrate that the rules are wrong and this is what he can do. But instead, all he did was damage his own reputation, I think. And so, yes, you can do independent expenditures, but you do so at your own risk of being labeled a hit piece artist.
Greg, let me say one thing. You said that the left was motivated. Let me tell you, I've received many emails from friends of mine who I consider very traditional conservative Republicans. One in particular, who's a finance guy. And every day I know when I'm going to get another Lincoln Project video he's showing off.
They're so good.
But the point is,
They're the best ones.
It is not, they're teaching the Democrats how to run a campaign, by the way, Lincoln Project. But I just want to emphasize that those people that are very active and motivated are not exclusively from the left.
That's another phenomenon that I actually, I'm totally in agreement, and I meant to raise as well. This is the first campaign also that I've ever seen an organized opposition from within a party to the party's candidate. Not just opposing the party's candidate, but actively endorsing the opposing party's candidate, like the Lincoln Republicans and other groups that have formed solely for the purpose of getting rid of their own president. It's pretty phenomenal.
Well, there are such things. The left doesn't like to use the term, but I like to use the term patriots. And people that think above the country, above party, are patriots.
I've never heard that the left dislikes that word. I agree that the right has unfairly and inappropriately, with the submission of the Democrats, co-opted too many right-wing themes and symbols and words like the flag, like freedom, and patriots may be another one.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, because there's party above country. Talk about John McCain. Country above party.
All right, gentlemen, I think we're gonna have to leave it there. Time is at our backs. You hit it out of the park again. You do every time. That's why people love coming back to hear you. And so I want to thank you both. Greg Brockbank and Dick Spotswood are two mavens of local, state, and federal politics. Gave us the whole rundown on what's going on in November. So I want to thank them. I want to thank all of you for attending. We will be sending out information about upcoming events as we get them scheduled. In the meantime, this event will be recorded, has been recorded, and will be available on our website within a day or so. We invite you to check out any past programs again on our website, marincoalition.org. So with that, thank you again, both gentlemen and our audience for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Dick.